Welcome everyone to the next episode of The Gray Stage. This is episode number 16. I'm Dan Hennon. We're joined here today with Greg Fernandez Jr., the author of the book The Gray Stage. Also Stephen, Catherine, and Sophia are here with us today. Welcome everybody.
Greetings.
Well, we got an interesting chapter today. It's chapter 9 for those following along in the book, in Greg's book. It's chapter 9, beginning on page 69 in the actual book. It's called Suspicious Activity, and so we'll go through this today on these items and have a little discussion on this. Suspicious Activity. Here we go, page 69. I'll start off with the beginning. There's a subheading called Return to Return Again, and then a segment here in italics. Authorities were forced to return to the crime scene on 2 separate occasions to recover bullets not collected during the initial search of the Crowley home. Considering the circumstances surrounding this case, I found that highly disturbing. And yes, just to reiterate, Greg, I think we all do. It's very disturbing when you have a crime scene, when you have the detectives on the crime scene have to return to the case not once but twice in a scene like this, in a very grisly, disturbing crime scene of a triple homicide, I call it, and not even to find all the evidence until a couple times, instances later. So continuing on January 19th, 2015, 2 days after the bodies of David Comel and Rania Crowley were discovered, a neighbor called police to report suspicious activity at the Crowley residence. A 911 call was placed at 12:51 p.m. And remember, this is a Monday afternoon. Now, this is a Monday. The caller refused to give a name, but claimed to live a few houses down from 1051 Ramsdale Drive in Apple Valley, where the Crowleys lived. Now, 15 minutes prior to the neighbor calling authorities, a camouflage painted GMC Blazer stopped in front of the Crowley residence. An unknown male got out of the truck and tried to enter the house. Unfortunately, the caller was unsure if the man was able to get inside. The caller did not provide the license plate of the vehicle. The entire incident of suspicious activity lasted 16 minutes and 38 seconds. 2 Apple Valley police units were assigned to the incident at 12:52 p.m., and a third unit was assigned 1 minute later. Now, the interesting thing with this section of the book here is this is the 19th, and for the listeners out there, we have to keep in mind that by this time, this was 2 days after the bodies were discovered, I had already set up the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook page that morning, the actual morning of the 19th, before all this took place. So the crime wasn't, I'll call it, the crime wasn't over, Greg. You know, they had already kind of wrapped up the crime scene at the house. But by the time I created this Facebook page looking for Justice for the Family, this suspicious activity hadn't even happened yet. And I was busy inviting members and friends to join the page because this whole case just seems so bizarre. And now we've only hit 1/3 of the bizarreness even happened because we had police return 2 additional times. And so we got to keep in mind there that this page was already created and folks were talking about the case well before this incident that we're talking about here that afternoon even took place. Very interesting. Continuing on, at 12:56 p.m., Unit 4918 was the first officer to arrive at the Crowley residence. Unit 4918 noticed flowers on the front step. Unit 4949 arrived 3 minutes later, and Unit 4943 joined the other officers at 1 p.m. So we've got to keep in mind here that the crime scene, the bodies were taken out on that Saturday, late night Saturday, early morning Sunday. The detectives did their work on Sunday, took photos, and I believe on that Sunday night cleared the scene. from a detective's perspective, and maybe Stephen, who's joining us here as well, could shed a little more light on that, how that all takes place, because the professional cleaners were already in there that Monday morning on the 19th before this episode took place. Were they not? How does that work?
Yeah,
as far as closing off the crime scene? You know, the yellow tape was already removed, meaning that the crime scene was completed. I mean, the investigation on site was done. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, when they bringing the crime scene, let's say janitors, we used to call them, bringing them in, early is, it's their call and such. But I mean, a crime scene like that, I mean, that crime scene might be sealed for 2 weeks. If you're doing your job on that, if they were seeing what we're seeing now, so I don't know, ignorance or not, but we saw in the Marshall case how fast they brought in the crime scene and removed the yellow tape. Same kind of thing, in and out.
And so the one thing that's interesting, back on the 19th when this took place, when I created this page, some of the first comments that came on with people interested in is, what does it look like now? And then there was no photos available, but then some people started commenting right away by saying, well, there's no crime scene tape up. And so that was our first kind of alert where our antenna went up by saying, wait, they've already pulled down the yellow crime scene tape already on a triple homicide, including a husband, wife, and a young child. And they said, yeah, it's all, I think it's being cleaned, now, and the tape is down. So that was one of the first things that got people really suspicious by saying, well, why would that be already? And then the cleaners were there, and now we get this suspicious activity, which none of us knew about this on the 19th that were covering the case until we received the FOIA request on this case, and it talked about the 911 suspicious call afterwards, on the 19th. The body's discovered once again on the 17th. So this really shed light because no one should have been in that house. Now what they do is leave a lockbox, I think, on the front door, and you can enter the correct combination and to get the key, to get access to that key to get into the house. But that's mainly for family, immediate family to get in there if they need something. And so, we found out that the folks, as part of this, that friends of David's were already in that house. All right, so that's the first part.
Oh, wait, well, Dan, let me say something, just to digress for a second, is, if it's a serious crime, too, they'll have a patrol car or canvass the area more often. We'll put a lockbox on it, keep the tape up. They've already spoke to neighbors to tell them to keep an eye out, so you have eyes on this neighborhood now. And if they want to go back in, they go back in a couple days later or something. They just close this thing out way too early. But that's yeah, you're right.
And then the other thing that came up, I remember on the very first day when that Justice page on Facebook was created, that people were commenting about, hasn't there been a vigil, or will there be a vigil? Folks, neighbors standing outside with candles like you typically see, flowers on the front steps. And the folks that were there, that were close by, says, there's no plans for a vigil. There's no flowers on the front stoop or nothing like that. And now we get this case that it's the first that we see here by the caller saying that there was, some flowers on that front stoop. But we were imagining, like I had said too, even with the little Rania dying age 5, I said, was there stuffed bears, teddy bears, flowers, candles lit? Where is all this activity for a horrendous crime like this? And the folks said, well, I don't see anything. There's nothing there. And then when I drove by it, there was nothing there. And they said, a lot of that stuff where the flowers were left out was cleaned up, and picked up by family right away. So you never got that sense like you typically see on the evening news at a big mass murder or a shooting or a crime scene like this, where there's a big outpouring of support from neighbors, families, and friends. That's the one thing that really stuck out for me personally in a case like this. There was none of that. There was no nightly vigils.
My thoughts on that also, Dan, was that at the Marshall house, there wasn't, they were young high school kids. There wasn't any sort of, mementos or flowers or pictures. There wasn't a lot out in front of that house either. And what I'm getting at is that tells, maybe these neighbors are, hey, pretty much, there may be some intimidation factor. Little kid dies. There's always teddy bears and stuff out there. So why there should have been more of that in cleaning up or not? How much evidence was there of any of it being out there anyway?
Yep, and that's true. When this all took place, I called it, suspect, or I raised my antenna, but folks who got on that page and joined the justice group that were, detriments or deterrents to that page said, why? Just because there's no, flowers out there, you got to assume something's suspicious here? I said, no, but it certainly leads you that way when it's already a suspicious, strange case like this. And remember, the first time I heard about this case, me personally, was the 19th, was the morning of the 19th. I didn't see it in anything in the news on the 17th when the bodies were recovered, nothing on the news or the newspapers the next day on the 18th. And then a friend forwarded to me a link that morning of the 19th when I got to, the office. When I got to the office that Monday morning at work, I'm like, well, this sounds just like the Philip Marshall case. Looked into it a little bit. I did a couple quick searches on Facebook to see if there's a group that I could join to investigate, to look at this, or a memorial page or something about the family. And there was nothing about this case. And so I quickly put together I just created a group, and I got 25 I think members that first day or two, and that was really it. But then I logged back into work and I started doing my normal work stuff. But I just quickly created that page, and then I got contacted by Thomas Lapp, who said, you know what, I don't know who you are, but I created a justice page as well for David Crowley of Gray State. And I didn't know who he was. I wasn't sure what even the term Gray State even meant. I wasn't following the project or anything. He said, oh yeah, this project was going on, was big time for a couple of years. I said, well, I just did it for the sympathy and the empathy for the family. And so we both had pages created that morning of January 19th. Both were set up and running before the suspicious 911 call came, where all the shenanigans kept going on. Is there anything else there to address as far as a camouflage truck showing up? That doesn't raise anything alarming to me at first. It does once we know what came of this. But at first, if it was an unknown male trying to enter the house, strange. It's no big deal, I guess. Couldn't get in, and they couldn't get the license plate. But they simply called police because it was what I called, that's fair enough, it was suspicious activity. Now what they don't say, and we don't know if it was true yet, is what was they never said, did they hear a gunshot or anything, but the allegation is that some suspect, myself mainly, is that's when that gunshot went off to fire that hole in the ceiling because of the missing bullet. But never once does that person who called 911 say there was a gunshot heard. They just said there was a person trying to enter the home. So keep that in the back of our minds as well, because that hole was not in that ceiling as of this date yet, possibly on the 19th, but certainly not before, we don't think.
Are we certain on the date that the cleaners were inside the house doing their work? Because
we don't know.
wouldn't the father...
We don't know if it was the 18th or the 19th, but they were in already at this time, I believe, on the 19th, that morning. They were there, and I don't know if they came back from the afternoon on the 18th, that Sunday, or if they were initially beginning their work on the 19th. But they were in process, and we know that they didn't, conclude until I think it was the 20th. So we don't know when they started, unless, Greg, do you have any further info on that, or Catherine?
Well, we tried to contact them. They never answered that question. All that we wanted to know was what date did you guys start and what date did you guys finish, and we couldn't get. And
that's a very good question, and it's not anything they should be alarmed or afraid of answering. It's not a touchy subject. It's just simply the begin date and the end date of their work at that residence is all that you're asking. And I think that's a very fair question. And there might be someone out there now listening to this 6 years later that worked with them or with that group, and that's all that we're getting at. If someone could, comment on this video once it goes live, if they know of someone. We're looking at the start and the end date. We know it's multiple dates, but just to confirm with that cleaning crew when they started and when they ended.
Yeah, and their name is the Biotech Emergency Services, and that was the company that was hired. We know they were definitely there on January 20th, but beyond that, I can only guess.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm asking is because the bodies were discovered on the 17th. They were removed between, well, around 1 a.m. in the morning, 1 a.m. or 1:30 in the morning. The autopsies were done that Sunday in the morning. Then calls were being made to family members late that afternoon and the next day, the 19th. So how are they able to get a cleaner that quickly into the house?
Well, that's the other question, I think, and maybe Stephen can elaborate on that as well. But the quickness of the cleaners being in that house should be raising all of our antenna for the quickness for all this. That they wanted to get everything clean quick. Now, is that something normal, Stephen? In a case like this?
No, not a case like this, because first off, we all agree there's not too many cases like this. So, having said that, we've cleared homicides and had cleaning crews there. Usually it's a couple of days, maybe 3 days. It's up to the detectives. If it's suspicious circumstances, maybe longer. Maybe, because everything's a homicide until proved otherwise. But this here, no. It's like we go back to the Marshall case, same thing. I mean, the cleaners in there, everything else, and then everything's gone. And if they're forced to go back into the house, oh well, there's nothing left or what have you. No, it's way too fast.
Now, Greg, I've got a question for you, Greg. Now, because we're six years later, and the neighbors in the area, some of these people typically are more willing to come forward the longer this goes. And so, if the neighbor, maybe the person that called themselves, that called 911, is now not afraid to come forward and even to give their name and to give a little elaboration to us on an interview or something, that'd be very helpful. But to this date, we still don't know who this person even was. They just said that they were not the immediate next door neighbors on either side of the home, but they were a couple of houses down. Right. I think what they did was correct. They called the authorities, said there was a suspicious, couldn't read the license plate, gave them what they gave, hung up, and didn't want to give their name. Well, I think that's all very good. I've got no problem with this person and the actions they took at all. It'd be nice to talk to see what prompted, was there anything else surrounding this to make the call. But I think it'd be nice to talk to this person someday.
Yeah, I would love if that person could, if they're hearing this, if they can they can always contact Dan. They can always contact me. We would love to just hear more about what you actually saw that day, why we're talking about a quote-unquote suspicious person and not persons. Maybe it's suspicious activity. Maybe that's a better way to say it, but we know that this person saw a GMC truck with quote-unquote army paint on it, and a male got out. We would love to know more about who that male was. Were there any other people in that car? And this person says they were there for about 15 minutes before the person actually called. I don't know if, and that's the other thing, because I'm not sure, maybe it's on this document here, maybe we can find that out later. Did they call 911, or did they just call the Apple Valley Police? Because there's an incident number, a case number, can I safely assume it's the police?
I think, Greg, by getting that FOIA request that talked about it, and I'll get that to you, that screenshot, it showed to me by reading the details that it was, in fact, a 911 call that dispatch received, and then they sent the units out there. I don't think they just called the Apple Valley Police phone number or something to inquire about it, to mention it. But I think they did call 911. Now, that's very common in Minnesota here where I'm at, and maybe for you guys in other states as well. But I'm not sure if anyone calls a normal police phone number anymore. With anything that you've got, you just typically call 911 and let them direct the importance or what type of department needs to be involved, and let them do the work. So I'm assuming this person just rang up 911 on their probably their house phone or their cell phone, and then went from there.
Okay. That would make sense because of how much detail there is on this, and because it's a quote-unquote incident detail report. I just know that a lot of the witnesses, a lot of the neighbors were given the phone numbers of the cops. If they had anything more to add, I'm sure they were given somebody's card and they could call them. But yeah, it wouldn't correspond with anything here. So that was one of the first questions that I had when you first got this. I was like, okay, where is this a 911 call? But okay, what you're saying makes a lot more sense now that you say it.
And the next paragraph that I read already, as far as this incident lasting 16 minutes and 38 seconds, for the listeners out there that may not be familiar with this, Greg just used the timestamp of when the call came in versus the timestamp of when dispatch cleared the units, basically saying that there's nothing more to look into, nothing more to do. They closed the case, and it gives you a timestamp of when that happened. And so the difference between the two really is just your time that Greg came up with there.
Yeah, what I looked at there, that's a great question, because I was even going through this. I was like, wait a minute, where did I get this 20 minutes from? I was like, okay, here's where I got that from, is that the caller says that 15 minutes prior, so 15 minutes prior to when they call, this is what happened. So that's 15 minutes. The police or the call is made at 12:51:48, so 12:52. The police arrive, I believe, it looks like the first officer gets there at 12:56. So that doesn't give them much time, so that's where I got that 20 minutes, because obviously by the time that the cop gets there, this person or persons are all gone. So anything that they did, that's all the time that they had for this call. Whether there was other people that entered the house later or prior, we really don't know. We just know that, well, this is the actual documentation that we do have.
And the other question I've got, Greg, is, because this is middle of the day, essentially, nowhere in this report states that the cleaning crew was there, or the cleaning truck, van, or vehicles were there. And so we can't necessarily say that they were actively cleaning at that point, but we know that the cleaning had started either on the 18th or the morning of the 19th, and it closes it, and it wraps up on the 20th. But they would have been there. My question is, why wasn't the vehicle there? As far as cleaners wouldn't just come in and just work a couple hours in the morning and say, hey, we'll be back in the afternoon, tomorrow to do the rest. There would have been a vehicle there unless they were off at a lunch break, but that doesn't make sense either. So.
Well, that was why I thought, well, there's no way that the cleaners could have been here until the 20th. My guess.
That's the only time they mention it in the police reports too.
Right.
Is the 20th, because at 1 o'clock in the afternoon they call and say, hey, we found a bullet.
Right, and that rug had to have been one of the first things that the cleaners would have taken out of the house.
More than likely. Do we know then if the cleaners came on the 18th or 19th at all? Maybe they didn't.
We don't, unfortunately. Also,
and that's why.
Go ahead, Sylvia.
No, that's why it disturbs me that they were in that house when that house was even cleaned. It's a biohazard and everything, and they're in there.
And they're only in there for a short while, too.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, William. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, of course.
Hey, William.
Hello.
We're just covering just the first page of 69, and we're almost to the end of the incident report. Okay. So, if you have anything, feel free to join in, jump on in.
Oh, will do.
Awesome.
Sounds good, Greg. I can continue on with the in the book.
Okay. Stephen, did you have something to add?
Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
Oh, no, guys, no, you did fine. We covered that the show before last a little bit, too. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so now we're on the top of page 70 for those following along. It says, according to the incident detail report, it was, quote, unknown who was at the residence or why. It is not known if the person who tried to enter the house left the flowers, unquote. The incident was closed at 1:08 p.m. If the caller's timeline is correct, this gave the unknown male about 20 minutes to enter and exit the home before police showed up.
Now, it's very curious to me, Dan, how did they connect Chris Klein, the owner of this army painted truck, how do they connect that to him? And I hope we get some of that later on. We don't get too much of that, but obviously that was a really big question, and it seemed like a lot of people were very quick to kind of throw Chris Klein under the bus, maybe? I don't know. There was a lot of suspicious things about him. His story didn't line up. We're going to get into all of that, so maybe I'm jumping the gun here. Just sticking with, if anybody has anything to add or any comments to make on this 911 call, and I'll make sure that everybody does have a copy, or Dan will make sure everybody has a copy of this soon.
Okay.
So what I did is I just took everything that I saw in this and tried to make it flow, put it into some form that would make it easy for people to kind of follow up and kind of see, okay, what happened, when, who did what, et cetera, et cetera. It would be really nice to know who called them, and I hope that person will maybe contact Dan, contact me, kind of help us out, give us some more details. And was this the only person, the only activity that they saw? Were they told, was anybody told by the cops to make sure, if you guys see anything strange, call us? How typical is in California? I mean, I don't think anybody would even call for anything, but that's a whole other issue.
At this point, yeah.
It doesn't affect them, kind of thing. But
no.
All right. Well, Catherine, any thoughts on this call?
Oh, sorry, it took me a while to unmute myself. But no, I mean, you guys have covered it all. I really have nothing to add right now. Sorry.
Okay. All right, I'm just going to scroll down to page 72, and Dan, if you want to read a little bit there, if anyone wants to jump in, please feel free. But here we go. This is it.
Okay, so this is now page 72 under the heading item 57. Continuing on February 17th, 2015, investigators were notified about a bullet hole in the living room ceiling. Based on that information, authorities returned to the Crowley residence on February 18th and found a bullet, item 57, in the attic above the living room. The bullet weighed 180.18 grams and is the heaviest of all 6 spent rounds. Like items 45 and 53, white material was also observed on this spent cartridge. The nose of the bullet was particularly expanded.
What does that mean? The nose of the bullet was partially expanded?
That's Stephen, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it probably deflected off of something partially. If it's something solid, it's going to expand a little more evenly, flat like a mushroom, even though it's going to be obtruse, But if it caught something, a nick or side of a board or nail, it wouldn't be expanded all the way.
So I would assume that David's head is going to be the heaviest of all 3 people's heads, the biggest. Why does this bullet weigh more than any of the other bullets found? If it hit David's head, hit his cranium, went through the ceiling, hit hard wood on the attic, and then bounced back down. I mean, I just kind of expect this one to not weigh so much.
You know what? I think it actually caught a lot of the drywall. That material in there. I think it just basically gathered a bunch of that in, and then when it slammed in, it just kind of really compacted it, and then just bounced where it did.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Thanks. Exactly, William. Yeah, that's and the thing is that and also, guys, is that the new ammunition, the stuff that's cased in with a certain amount. There's so many great ammunition on mushrooms, it doesn't lose pieces. It's best thing to stay together and go through and get a bigger hole. So it's going to pick up more stuff in mass because it's going to stay together. The more jacketed it is.
Right, and Greg, your comment was exactly always been my thought with this type of hollow point. If it's going to be striking a skull and then supposedly then after that going through a ceiling and then hitting joists in a roof, there would be more than a partially, I forgot the word, but it would pretty much be destroyed like the rest of the other ones. But this one seems to be pretty much okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, I kind of feel like, I mean, just because it went through all the different material, I mean, we had some plastic in there. I mean, it looked like it was some pretty tight, stapled down plastic, initially at least. And then, of course, you have the drywall, and then you also get to hit the...
Yeah, but that's all after it supposedly went through David's head.
Yes.
And so if it's going to go through the head, a hard surface, it will mushroom on impact. And then from that point forward, it should pretty much be mushroomed out completely, not just partially. And so and with that mushrooming, it's going to gather hair, skin, brain. It wouldn't just have white powder, you know? And so... And I'm sorry, I don't mean to go off on a tangent about 57, but this one, boy, this one gets in my craw.
Would there be blood anywhere from the ceiling into the attic and all that? Should we expect to see any blood if it was shot through David's head?
Eventually.
Because, I mean, it sounds like because there was no blood found on this bullet, if you are going to try to believe what the police say, then what happened to this bullet must have wiped all of the blood off.
And that's not how it works. I mean, once it's mushroomed and gathered inside of those pulled back portions, it stays within those sections of that mushroomed fragment. And so the fact that they found nothing other than white powder and some supposed DNA, which they don't even clarify, but zero blood, it's like, so we know it didn't go through David's head. So it would make more sense, like what William was saying just a second ago, that, you know, a partial expanding or whatever the terminology was would then make more sense if it's just been shot directly through the drywall, the ceiling, and then it hits part of a joist or bounces off of something. You know, that makes sense. But for them to expect me to believe it went through David's head, I call foul.
I would like to see a photo of item 57 as is, because it seems like the only photos we have are just of it lodged into the...
Right.
Go ahead.
My thought here is, I mean, the only way, and I do mean the only way I think this would be possible to fit the narrative, I believe, is it went through just nothing but soft tissue. So, I mean, maybe going through the temple or something like this, like an area where it's a lot softer. I think it's
through
possible.
His cheek? Through the cheek, maybe?
I mean, that's another possibility. Just, you know, basically just going through just very soft areas. I think it's not
going to kill him if it goes through the cheek.
Exactly.
But you see, yeah, there's, yeah, then that still leaves, and I would not go along with that thought process from the police's perspective. I understand you're tossing that out there as a thought, but then that still leaves the fact of, well, where's the bullet that killed David? Because if it only went through supposed soft tissue, then it wouldn't have. Where's the bullet that went through his skull? There's external beveling and an exit wound, so we know one went through his skull. Where's that one? And they've never produced it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was looking for anything in their notes anywhere that would say that they found just some type of blood on the ceiling, in the living room ceiling. Even in some of the photos when we first got them, I was like, oh, that does look like blood, but they don't mention it. I think if they did find blood there, they'd probably mention that. I mean, there's no blood on the ceiling, period.
Yeah. And we got some on the wall, which is attested. So we don't even know whose that is anyways, but it's the whole thing that there's nothing on the ceiling, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, especially if, you know, you shoot yourself in the head, you'd expect for that right there to line up. I mean, it's already going to be kind of a strange angle as is.
One of the Gray State goons said that the reason why, you know, there's no blood is because of that Christmas tree, that there was a lot of blood on that Christmas tree. But if that were true, wouldn't that have been documented?
Yeah, exactly.
It would have been removed from the house and not left there.
That's true.
Just like they removed the couch and the carpet and everything else.
Bingo. I mean, if we go off of what some of the other theories are, there's brain matter all over on that tree as well too. I mean, you look at the tree, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing.
Right, and there's nothing to the left or the right or above or below that tree. So what? The tree just happened to catch a 2-foot. That's the only place that the spatter went. Yeah, I don't buy that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if they would have tested item 33, you know, I don't recall seeing any tests on the little blood that was for the Paleos cage either. I mean, they should have tested those things. Once again, if that is how it went down, you'd figure they would have went and tested that. That's the only way that you can prove that, yeah, he indeed, you know, potentially killed himself, or at least that is his blood, at the very least. So.
I agree. Sorry, again, it took a while to unmute me, but I agree with everything you just said, William.
Oh, thank you.
Shall we keep reading on?
All right, continuing on. Quote, characteristics of the whole, BCA crime scene lead Joe Cooksley wrote in his report, quote, and its surrounding area indicated that a projectile was traveling generally west to east as it entered the ceiling and exited in the attic, unquote. After examining, go ahead.
No, that was a big thing because I was trying to figure out, okay, west to east. West to east. Does that line up with where this bullet hole is and everything, and where David's body was found? I guess that's just a random thought. Sorry, David.
No, it's all good. I'm trying to think. They could have sworn like they did that on the police drawing, where they actually they put I think it was One Direction.
The music band?
No. Nothing that lame.
Is it okay if I ask Stephen a question about that real quick right here? And the way that the hole is shaped in the ceiling. Now, when a bullet strikes a surface like that, is the wider end the point of impact, or is it the narrower end the point of impact? Do you know?
Well, it's going to be the narrow. The tip of the bullet's going to be the point of impact, and that mushrooms it should be wider than the bullet itself. And it will lose weight or it could gain weight, like William said, depending on what it hits. And by the way, for them to go up there and try to scavenge blood and things like that, I don't see these guys doing that up in some, like roof joists or inside the sheetrock up there. I don't see them going that far.
Yeah, especially not within a short time frame too.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I don't see brain matter. I mean, there could be some. I mean, it's hard to say. The brain matter going up that high at that angle, that far away, maybe 12 feet away up at an angle. I don't, it's tough to say,
Okay, so when we're looking at this photo, when we're looking at this photo right here where it's just a small indentation before it goes into a full-fledged hole, so where that small indentation is where the tip of the bullet would first then hit there and then the trajectory pattern? Okay, thank you. I've been worried about that.
Oh, and guys, a hollow point going through, let's say left to right as an in and out on a skull shot, you look, the hole's the size of a silver dollar on the exit. That means that thing had to mushroom extensively on impact. They made the mushroom on the first impact. They made the maximum damage in flesh is at the beginning. So, it can hit bone, they'll still go through and get through an arm and ulnar radius. Femur maybe close distance. 45 at maybe 25, 30 feet might enter a femur or hip and it may not exit. It'll still blow the heck out of it. But through the skull or something, that's, if you look at the wounds on Google to head wounds by calibers, the exit wound is just so much bigger, so much larger.
Steve, I have a question. This is Dan. I had in the past suggested one of our listeners or a member of the group try this test, and I haven't had anyone successfully do it yet. But just to get a piece of sheetrock and a .40 caliber Springfield handgun and fire for instance, 3 shots directly into the sheetrock using a hollow point bullet, and then do 3 shots of, for instance, a coconut sitting on a table. 3 coconuts, firing that, and then to see the impact of behind that, when the hollow point would have expanded to see the diameter of the hole in the sheetrock, and then compare the two, average size hole of hitting nothing first versus an average size hole of hitting the coconut, in this case, resembling a head, to get the difference. And then measuring this up with the ceiling hole to see, did it hit anything or not? And I think the answer would be, in the Crowley home, that hole in the ceiling did not go through anyone's skull. It had not yet mushroomed. Was what my point was. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you're so right. I mean, imagine, you can put your fist through a sheetrock wall. I mean, most of us can, right? No stud on the other side. And so that's the same resistance for that. And then when you go to a skull or a coconut, like you said, or what have you, I mean, and it's not a gelatin, a ballistics thing. It's not, center mass. This goes through a head. Your skull is a lot harder than sheetrock. So Dan, you're right. It's going to, as soon as it impacts, it's going to expand.
Well,
so that did not go. There's no way that went through a skull, two sides, and went up there. Could have deflected off maybe his forehead a little bit and guided itself. I still think it was a deflection shot. Maybe I still think possibly maybe it was Rania. Maybe that threatening thing I had earlier, that theory that they threatened her, and there was some sort of activity in the house. But that shot is really that's the mystery shot. But no, Dan, you're right. Sheetrock, it could go through and not expand like that. Absolutely.
So just to kind of expand on this, I guess, no pun intended, I actually did get the dimensions of the shot of that actual area right there. So basically, what we got about 4 centimeters right here. I mean, I got the dimensions of the bullet just by itself, of course, not with an expansion, of course, but it's about 4 centimeters all the way across, and then you also get about 2.5 centimeters roughly. It's all kind of rough guesstimate here, but just kind of coming down a little bit. That's basically like how wide and all this is. But on top of that, if you also consider the hole, I mean, it does. I mean, you do have a point here that this doesn't look like the thing had necessarily expanded. It just looks like it was just kind of fired in and just like that might have expanded out there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, keep in mind that the photo that Greg has up right now was after they actually put their finger in it and kind of made the hole bigger. And they have this in their notes. So the initial photo where it shows just the small divot, that one, the one he just had up there, the first one of the close-up. That one. You see the difference. So that's the original right there. And then the other one is that one right there is when they put their finger in it and was manipulating the hole.
Okay, I guess.
So they're looking for the bullet up in there. That's what they were doing, feeling around for the bullet, huh?
Yeah, very possible.
Yeah. This is already
in the meantime, making it much larger and wrecking the evidence at the same time.
Well, you can also see too, like there's the black markings on there. So
manipulating
I'm assuming
a crime scene like that.
I mean, that's my little problem I have with it, is you could definitely see some discoloration here, and it looks more black than red or anything like this. So, do you think maybe they just kind of took something just to kind of silence the hell out of it, and then just kind of shoot it into that, have it go through here? Is that maybe a possibility?
Like we say, at that close range in that small of a room or what have you, and somebody misses like that and it's going up, we know it didn't go off somebody's head or in or out. That was a miss or a threat shot or something. And you know what? Nobody went back in there maybe afterwards and, had a lone shot 2 days later, possibly, if they think they did or not, to clean something up, because I don't think anybody would still be alive. And why risk getting caught to throw some round out there and wake up the neighborhood for no purpose? And I still think it was a warning. I think they maybe poor Rania, they had a gun to her head and Dad went. I mean, I think they suffered, man. I think David was saved for last.
Oh yeah.
I mean, absolutely.
I think it's fair to assume, just looking at the body decons. I mean, David's midsection was definitely still very flesh colored, while the rest of them were not.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what with Sophia kind of thought that, and that's not the worst angle. Maybe they, held Rania and Comel hostage in the house, and they got David. But why remove him? Throw him in. Why he would not let them do that physically to him. So I think still everything kind of happened in the house, but. It was a sloppy crime scene, so it's not. I don't know. It sure wasn't professional.
Well, Greg, we've reached the hour mark. Did you want to keep going? I'm trying to keep you on.
Have we really already? That's ridiculous.
I don't. I'm just trying to keep you on schedule.
You're right. I believe it.
Hey, Greg. You know what? I think for the listeners, maybe go back and digress just a little bit on some motive or something. You know, to catch them up, and maybe, you know, I know I've gone back and forth a little between a, you know, straight on, you know, shadow ops, deep state hit, which I know for sure didn't happen, to, you know, the people involved in the screenplay and the project, and, you know, and all that kind of, you know, it's so, I mean, maybe, you know, when Apple Valley didn't do their job with how they involved on either side of the people involved in the project, or was it a gray state and they used the people in the project as pawns to go ahead and do this? You know, there's a lot of different variables on that, you know.
Oh, there's tons. I mean, they could have been framed. They could have been set up. That could be why they're so quiet, is they were told, you know, you guys better shut up or else we're going to blame you for it. Right. I don't really know. You know, what I know is how quickly they started saying that David Crowley was guilty, which to me is still baffling. It's still one of the most basic things that I would just think that in law enforcement you don't do. You just don't do.
You know. It's like when Philip Marshall was, you know, most of the community was chastising, you know, Philip about, you know, this guy was nuts and he was on some drugs or some sort of depressive pills and killed his kids and blah blah blah. You know, I mean, he didn't do it. We know that, but you know, they went after him.
Yeah, but
right away too.
But I think within the first couple weeks, you know, the first couple weeks up there, it was a little similar to the David Crowley case in the first couple days, because Dan was really around in the background when there was a lot of background people who really wanted to understand what was happening. They were going to do calls. They were going to do live things. They were going to do pretty much what we're doing now. Right, Dan? There was a whole group of those people. And with Philip Marshall, there was neighbors, there were people in that area, especially in those first weeks, because I was there. I think I was there that weekend. And when I went back two weeks later, it was like everybody had been told to just shut up. Nobody wanted to talk about it. We almost got a couple people to actually talk about it, and they got scared off. And I see a lot of similar things with this David Crowley case. Why are so many people so intent on making sure that everybody knows that they believe David Crowley is guilty? Were they told that? You know, are they sending a message to people that had threatened them? So even though because come on, it's common sense. It's common sense that David Crowley is not guilty. True. So there's a lot of theories and a lot of motive for why people would keep their mouths shut. But as far as the actual crime and who all did it and everything, and I just that's for me, that's still phase 2, and I'm still on phase 1.
You know what?
I'll continue.
You know, when I go back to Apple Valley, man, is, you know, they're just not straight on this. I mean, there's got to be a couple good cops in that department or something, but for them to control that, the biggest murder in the history of that town, and suspicious murder at that, the guy's, you know, writing stuff that the deep state wants him dead. I mean, you know, this is a big deal in a little town, just like Marshall was up there, and it's the same Stepford wife thing, and they get to him like a couple days later, and one neighbor talks to another. Maybe they got anonymous emails, you know, or whatever, and people are not going to talk, and that's what it becomes. And, you know, who's going to go up there? Apple Valley, Attorney General Ellison sure isn't. I mean, you got to go up the ladder. You got to go to Senator Grassley. I'll tell you what, that's who you go to. He was oversight for the law enforcement in the United States. He was involved, you know, he criticized Waco, Ruby Ridge, and Yosemite case. And this is a case, maybe we write him a letter, you know. He's a great guy.
That's a good idea.
He's oversight on law enforcement. He's pretty much the guy that, you know, really can haul in guys like Ellison and make them, you know, make them raise their right hand.
Yeah, he may have some motive to make that happen. You never know.
You know, hey, I mean, during the Yosemite case, Grassley came out. It was in the paper. It said it's the worst bungle in the FBI since Ruby Ridge and Waco about the Yosemite case we did. I mean, that's pretty strong for somebody to come out and say that. And this is ranking majority member. You know, wow, thank you.
So my theory on this, I got two things to say real quick. So, first thing, I definitely do think this is bigger than just if they're the GS guys, you know, the Gray State guys are involved, then I feel like this is much bigger than them. I don't think necessarily, like, I think Steven's onto something there. Basically, these guys, if they are involved, you know, just the opinion there that they are involved, then once again, it's fair to assume, I mean, this is why it looks like crap. You know, but on top of that, why it doesn't also look like a government hit. But also, were they given the orders to do so by somebody else? Potentially. Especially since you got to consider the Freemason and occult connections with Danny August Mason and Hendricks. Not to mention, you got some of the Freemasons that are in the Apple Valley Police Department. So is this, you know, some kind of a hit that way? Potentially. I mean, I don't think we can fully rule that out all the way yet. But the other thing,
I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
With this case, like I said, we can compare this to Pencock, which is right down the street from here, or from David's house. And if you look at how quickly the Pencock case was solved, I mean, those crime scenes, I mean, they didn't look like eerily similar, but there were some similarities there. But they, you know, they had a lot of the same detectives on it. You know, you look at, well, what's missing here? Well, you had Captain Bermel wasn't on that case. At least when I read on it, I didn't see Captain Bermel at all. But, you know, that was just pretty much just in and just done. They were able to call it really easy, you know, quick and easy to call. A lot of the same kinds of, they had some similarities when it came to the crime scene too, so I kind of feel like this is, we can kind of compare that, you know, why was this so, why did they take a little longer on this one, but on Pencock it was just, you know, just in and then done, you know, really in and out, so.
All right, Dan, you want to keep reading here?
Yes. Continuing on, it says, after examining the bullet hole in the living room ceiling, authorities found item 57 in the attic above the living room near the front door. There was no blood on this bullet. And let me repeat that. There was no blood on this bullet, but the nuclear DNA profile matched David Crowley. The DNA profile did not match Comel or Rania, period. So that's a huge statement right there. No blood on this bullet. And that's, keep in mind, it's a hollow point bullet that's going to be gathering brain matter, tissue, everything along the way. There was not a single drop of blood on it. Okay, continuing on. An email exchange between BCA analyst Catherine Roshi and Detective Tommy Booth stated no one had been charged with committing a double murder-suicide. Quote, good morning, Catherine, Detective Booth wrote on February 17th, 2015 at 8:04 a.m. Quote, nobody has been charged in this case, so I'm giving you permission to use up some evidence in its entirety for DNA analysis. If you need anything else, please feel free to contact me. Thanks for all your hard work, end quote. Anything there?
Yeah, that was a big thing for me because nobody has been charged in this case. And I'm like, okay, wouldn't that be evidence of David Crowley's innocence? First of all, if no one has been charged, and then of course we see there's no one that they can ever charge. They can never charge. Let me rephrase that. They could never charge David Crowley simply by the fact because he's dead, right? But it's just weird the way that they phrase that to say that no one has been charged in this case. I would think maybe they would have said the suspect is deceased or something like that. But to me, it's just one of some of those little things that just kind of made me think, I wonder if they were secretly looking into other people during this time, or after they found this, after they were notified, because they weren't notified of a bullet in the attic. They were notified, the police, as we're going to read, the police were notified of a hole in the living room ceiling. It's a big difference, but I'll save that.
I would say, Greg, this is Dan, maybe Stephen could expand on that, but when you do a DNA analysis, you use up that portion and you can't, use it again. And so if there's suspects or if it's a big case, it limits how many more times in the future, you can use some blood or spatter for analysis. And this time, I think she was just saying, and she probably didn't use the correct verbiage in her quick email that she wrote that morning, but just by saying, no one's charged, so feel free to use it all up, I think is what she meant. But she says, you have my permission to use up some evidence in its entirety. I think she was just basically saying, you got the green light to use all of it if you want to do your test, because we're not going to need it in the future, is what my interpretation of what she meant there. Does that kind of jive?
You know what? I'm not. I've been out of law enforcement for a while, and I'm not a DNA expert. But I mean, the verbiage is a little confusing. But we know they lacked gathering physical evidence in that home. We know that it wasn't extensive. They missed a lot of things, blood here, blood there. They should have plenty of samples. I mean, they, like when they do an autopsy of a liver or something, they take several slides. Although those aren't usually burned on the for DNA kind of stuff, but it doesn't take much of a sample to get a DNA match. It's so small, so minute.
Perfect. Okay, continuing on. Attempting to connect item 57 to the alleged murder weapon, authorities compared the bullet recovered to a bullet fragment found in the living room labeled as item 31. Originally, the bullet fragment labeled 31 was not included in the firearms examinations. Period.
And I'm not sure why. I mean, again, it's kind of weird that they would be comparing item 31, which is a quote-unquote fragment, to a bullet, unless they thought that item 57 was also a fragment. That was my first thought, until I saw this image that we're going to talk about next, so you can keep going on.
All right, the next heading is suspicious activity here. Quote, I spoke with Joe Cooksley, BCA analyst Lisa Kinsella wrote on April 14th, 2015 at 10:14 a.m. Quote, regarding item 31, labeled as bullet fragments, end quote. It isn't included in the FA assignment. We discussed that I will add the item 31 to the FA assignment and document it and examine it for suitability comparative exams, period. The bullet fragment labeled as item 31 weighed 19.14 grams. The fragment was noted to have a, quote, hair-like substance, end quote, and a torn jacket. The fragment was compared to items 42, 44, 45, 53, and 57, but not item 43.
So that was another thing. Going back to the actual weight. Look at the difference of the weight between item 57 and item 31. Maybe it's not relevant because, again, what we're going to see with this next photo, maybe that's why I'm making too much out of it than I really should have. But I don't know why I keep going back to that weight. Now, it did have a hair-like substance, is what they were saying. Like that was 31, but not 50. Not 57. So, and it's interesting that they would not compare it to item 43. Maybe again, that's because I don't know. I really don't know why not compare it to item 43.
Right.
Maybe budget reasons, right? But this is a bad image because with the images that we got, and this is in the most recent BCA 488-page document that we got. And so it was a Xerox copy, so copying it over onto the book obviously is just like there's almost no reason to. But what they're doing here is on the left side, you're looking at item 57, and on the right side, you're looking at item 53. And that's what they use to say, this little portion, this little rectangle box here, this is what they use to say that item 57 was shot by item 1. So this is how they prove that item 57 was shot by David Crowley's gun, and therefore they assume, since that, then it must have been David who shot it, and then this must have, I don't know how that leads to the bullet is the one that killed David, but that's what they're looking at. So looking at these grooves, people who know about this stuff and study this stuff, they may say, yeah, the police were right on. Or they may say, you know what, some of these lines don't match up, because to the human eye, to my human eye, some of this stuff just doesn't seem to match up.
Now, now this is called your lands and grooves testing, correct? To line them up under a microscope to see if it was fired from the same weapon, and it appears here that they were. And so they'll do this, but here they just take the two existing shots that were fired. And I don't know, as Stephen, do we see anywhere that someone in the test laboratory fired David's weapon, the actual Springfield, with one of his hollow jackets, and then line it up with one of these to make sure that that's actually the image it produces when the shots are fired from it, fired into the water or something, and then pick that piece up and then throw it under a microscope. Here they're comparing two bullets that found at the scene, but the same conclusion. They're doing their homework to ensure that it lines up.
Well, we also have to be careful.
Looks like it pretty much does.
Because item 31 is never ever, it's never called a bullet. It's always called a fragment. So is there a difference between a bullet and a fragment? Because item 31 is not credited with killing anybody, shooting at anyone. So is item 31 a fragment of one of the other bullets?
The terminology, a bullet is the casing and the projectile together. That's a bullet. Separated, you have a casing, and then when it's shot, it would be it's a fragment.
Okay, but they're calling all of the other ones are called a spent round, and item 31 is never called a spent round.
Oh, really? Oh, really? Okay, it's called a fragment.
It's called a bullet fragment. That's right.
Bullet fragment.
That's it.
That means it probably. That's interesting. I'd have to check in. I mean, their terminology might be a little different, but I think that's correct. Spent round, yeah, it's a spent round, but it's still a fragment of whatever, it's spent round. They didn't say spent bullets, so it's a round. It's
correct.
So the bullet casing round spent, yeah.
Okay.
Sounds right.
Greg, where was 31 found, or which bullet was that again?
31 was a fragment that was found closest to the south wall, so to the front living room wall. Mm-hmm. That's where 31 was found there.
But who did that one kill?
No one.
Okay.
No one.
But that was the one fired through the floor, or not?
No. That was just a fragment that they found in the living room. If I go back.
I am so sorry. I understand now. So no, that'd be a partial spent round. Absolutely.
Yeah. So here's where 30.
So, yeah.
Now, I mean, so that was the thing. Okay, well, why are they comparing this one? Like, wouldn't they? Because Dan, you are right. They did have two test fired bullets. So they had two test-fired bullets that they could use to compare the two test-fired bullets from, or spent rounds from all of the other spent rounds.
And the final, let's see. According to the BCA firearms report, quote, item 57 against item 31 show the presence of matching features. This means that item 1 fired 31, end quote. And so that's kind of a leap you're getting at there, Greg, saying that it shows simply some presence of some matching features. They're going on to conclude that it's definite that it actually did it. And I think what you're getting at, Greg, is that they're basically saying, well, it's close. And then the very next statement is they're saying, therefore, this case is closed because it is what it is. And that's a stretch, very much a stretch the way they got the phrasing is crafted very interesting the way it's stated here, and it's not a normal sentence here. Would it be in the law enforcement jargon, Stephen, as far as a detective saying, this is close, but so therefore it is?
No. It's not conclusive. You can mention it in another phrase or another paragraph or just your thoughts.
They're going out of their way to say that it's conclusive and definitive is what they're getting at here. Sure. I don't think that it necessarily is. So why would they do that? They're backing into their own theory that they called this a double murder suicide. Therefore, they're going to find the evidence now that supports that rather than finding the evidence of the actual case.
Exactly, just looking at like a bias, basically.
Yeah.
And then also, let's look at how much time they spent on David with autopsy or samples or the crime scene. Did they remove him last? I mean, I'm not sure if you guys might know about that. Which body was moved first? Which one was left in there afterwards? They may have looked over David's body more. I don't know. It's just such a sloppy crime scene. That's the biggest thing I see. It's just I've never seen anything like it. And I see a lot of hate in there. I don't see a professional hit team. I mean, it's just I think it's his buddies.
It's emotion is the thing that jumps out for me, and that wouldn't be the case in a professional hit.
Yeah. No, God, no. There's a lot of hate. Yeah, it's definitely emotion and hatred, or whatever. Yeah.
So the order of the bodies were tagged and placed in the body bags. We know that there was Renia. She was first at 12:55 a.m. David was second at 12:58, and Kamel at 1:10.
Okay.
And then, of course, at 1:15 they left with the bodies. So.
Wow.
So Kamel was last. That's interesting.
Right.
Could you repeat those times again, William? What time was Rania put in the bag?
12:55 a.m. And then David was 12:58 a.m. And then Kamel was 1:10 a.m. And I know I looked at the time and like, wait, what? 3 minutes in between here and then 12 here? What? This doesn't make any sense.
Especially with the amount of time that they were supposedly decomposing and the condition that their bodies were in. The times do not make sense at all. It's like it was like wham, bam, thank you, ma'am.
Exactly. Well put.
That's right.
Well, if you figured they were taken maybe probably in different vehicles, maybe I'm assuming, but that means there's transportation. There might be one comes here. It fits in a time where they totally remove the bodies very quickly.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Well, I think just the last thing that I want to just mention about, because the comparing of item 57 to item 31 has just been something that I just never have been able to grasp. They have all of these other bullets. If they're comparing item 31 to 57, is it safe to guess that if they were to compare the other spent rounds to 57, that it wouldn't match up? I mean, shouldn't we see matches between all of these spent rounds with item 57?
You definitely assume. I mean, that would be a thorough investigation. This is not thorough at all. They're just trying to go and just, like Sophia said, just the wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. That's what they're trying to do with this case.
Yeah, Mike.
I'm sorry. I still think there was two firearms used.
Yeah, that's what it seems like, because like Dan was saying, it's like, why are they comparing those two, but not with the test fragment? That's what they should be comparing it to, but they didn't. So they found something.
Right, exactly.
So, Greg, they'd also, if it was a thorough investigation, like William said, they'd compare the 3 bullets found that went through Rania and Kamel, the 1 bullet fired that was found in the basement, the 1 bullet fired in the attic, all of them would match. But then you would suspect the first ones would, and then you go the extra mile to make sure that 57 matches, just to make sure there's not a second weapon used. But then you'd compare them all to a test-fired shot in the lab from David's gun that was done by investigators later. All those would match the lands and grooves if that was the case, and that would be a full investigation to make sure they fired a spent weapon that they've done in the lab would match all the ones collected at the scene. Now, because these are hollow point bullets, Stephen, would they not be large enough to be able to, under a microscope, to actually see the lands and grooves to get a shot like this? And so maybe that was the number 31 was the best one to use? Or in an investigation like this, they wouldn't have to use up space with getting all these screenshots and images with items, 5 different items. So they just did this one just to show, look, we've done our homework and it's good to go.
Yeah, no, I mean they need more angles. I mean those lands and grooves should line up almost like straight lines. I mean, and that's how you test it. And that means to me that there was 2 weapons used. And there's more than one shooter. One man wasn't in there with 1 gun. And there's 2 to 3, maybe 4 people in there, and they all had weapons. David had, there's somebody tried to get to the weapon, and he, we know about the lockbox by the bedroom, in the bedroom. It should match, and that's why there should be several photographs matching up ballistics.
Gotcha.
Well, especially if you consider like the blankets on the. Well, I mean, I guess the crime scene was kind of jacked up anyways, as the police kept moving things. But I mean, we'd have to if we have like the photos of what it looked like before. I mean, I believe weren't all the blankets on the bed? Weren't they initially?
The blue blankets, or?
Yeah, in the bedroom. Were they all in the bed initially, or were they already thrown off? That I feel like that could tell us something there, because if the blanket's already off, then maybe he kind of dove onto his bed, got it real quick, and then hopped up and was ready to go.
Greg, this is Dan. I've got a question for Stephen in this case. Stephen, by looking at the image that's on the screen now for the lands and grooves, I have two questions just to clarify what you were saying. Are you saying that this image here looks to you in your eyes that the lines do not match up? Or are you saying that they match up, but because they didn't give us the comparisons of the other ones, that maybe this is the best one that fit and they let the other ones go on purpose not to show the public?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a cover-up. Absolutely. Anything you suspect that is out of the ordinary, we've dissected this case for months, and you know about it for years, is anything that should be there and isn't there is a cover-up. Absolutely.
But does the lines match up to you? I don't have a background in this, so it looks like to me that this lines up these two lands and grooves, but
yeah.
You do think they match up?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I thought you were saying maybe that you were alluding to maybe that they don't. Okay, gotcha.
Oh no.
Okay,
You're not going to get all the lines matching up, but you get to go from the middle out and look at those too.
Now, would this be something, Greg, that we could file another FOIA request to Apple Valley to say we'd like to see the lands and grooves tests of the other bullets that were not presented in the 488-page report? And they'd write back and say, yeah, here they are, or they'd say, no, everything that we did was in the report.
This would be with the BCA, which we have. They've been a little more open. So I'll definitely make a note of that now, and we can.
That's a good question. I'd like to see the other remaining 4 bullets compared to each other and compared to 1 or 2 test firings that they did, assuming they did, or maybe they didn't. And maybe by filing the FOIA request that way, they may come back and say we didn't do any testings back at the lab.
Okay,
and that could get to our answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know we had asked for maybe we were going to ask for maybe color photos or just better photos, not Xerox photos, which is what it looks like we actually got. So, okay, I'll make a note of that.
That's a fair question. That's good.
All right.
Stephen, I have a question.
Yes. Stephen,
if there were 2 handguns that were exactly like David, and David, for instance, David and Kamel had the same exact gun, and then David sold Kamel's to one of David's friends.
Mm-hmm.
And if that gun had been cleaned exactly the same way that David's gun had been cleaned and fired with the same type of ammunition, would they have similar markings would they leave similar markings on the bullets?
Similar,
but
different. The lands and grooves would be different, would they not?
It's distinctive. Yeah, Dan says they're distinctive. It's like a fingerprint. There's close fingerprints. The DNA thing's 1,000,000,001, but fingerprints kind of get close. But there's distinctions, and they definitely each weapon's like a fingerprint, like Dan's saying.
Okay.
So Sophia, just to conclude that, no matter if they bought it, cleaned it, serviced it, fired the same exact weapons, would they be similar? Is what I think. What Sophia was questioning, and the answer is no. No matter what you do, they'd still have their own identification on the lands and grooves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Okay, just wanted to make sure because.
But that's a good question. That kind of stuff has come up before, and what I have alleged all along is that David's gun that he owned was laid there at the scene and may not have been fired at all. And a similar weapon, with a silencer was the one used for all these, including the one in the attic, which is still out on the loose today. But then the question would be the lands and grooves wouldn't line up at all. They'd be similar, but maybe just similar enough like this where they said it was similar, but then they incorrectly concluded that it was definitive this gun. You know, that's where the question lies. That's all I've got.
Okay. Any final words, anybody? Speak now, or forever hold your peace till next month.
Yeah, the next month's podcast, Greg, is going to be a good one, because then we get into the actual person rather than the suspicious activity in the home. We're actually getting names and dates of actual people to focus in. So I'm looking forward to that episode.
Me too.
Oh, it's gonna be a good
All
one.
right, thanks, guys.
Hey,
All right,
thanks.
guys.
Appreciate it.